That would be misleading. It's, yes, so you can't do that. Yeah, but it's not.
Okay, thanks. Just curious about standards.
I'm starting this.
It's still here, yeah.
Did not have a, daycare like that.
Yes.
Was with your mom, she goes.
I like to tell her like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Best. I think Will Barton.
Yeah, they're all with.
Bill Dalton.
That's serious. Brought all the ones I had with me.
Did you just say rude?
Yeah.
My grandkids said that's a rude.
They might have got it from me.
I guess that's the thing these days.
That is there.
Yeah, I'm not. She's like.
I'm fine. Like the whole version. They're standard. They're standard.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Well, it's probably not 22.
Yes.
One of my.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, that's great. Yes. They both were for the federal pieces and the justice fair.
Okay.
They're working remotely for Jack NGO for Iowa Tech. They're both sort of like. We'll see what happens. Technically, this is going. Benjamin has a. Just his building, his environment. Building that they were just. That's just something like that. For a couple of years, so there's no pressure on putting. It's like long.
Yeah.
And then, so they're probably not gonna do Jacqueline. When they're gonna these rules, but you know, that's work, they. So her. So she. So they're definitely, well, we'll see what happens, so. We. We'll see what happens, for new jobs, so whatever.
Yeah, good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience. We just had a audit committee meeting right before this, so we're just getting reset and hard to get connected to you guys, so now we're working. All right, I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order at 6:05 p.m. Councillor Fitton, can you please move adoption of the agenda?
Sure, moved by myself, seconded by Rick Doncaster. Be it resolved that the council meeting agenda of December 18th, 2024 be adopted and circulated.
All in favor of the agenda? That's carried. All right, any disclosure of pecuniary interest with regard to tonight's agenda? If not, we'll move on to public information. And tonight we have a presentation from Mr. Rod Sinclair of Baker Tilly Accountants of Pembroke, and I'm happy to have him here. And we're happy to have this audit here, Mr. Sinclair. So we're going to move the presentation by Mr. Sinclair. Reed Doncaster, can you please move?
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fitton, be it resolved that the presentation to council by representatives of Baker Tilly RPO LLP regarding the Town of Deep River 2023 consolidated financial statements and the 2023 financial management letter be received.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair, you have the floor, so please go ahead. And council, would you prefer we ask our questions as we go through, or hold them to the end?
You can ask throughout, yeah,
Thank you.
more timely that way.
Okay.
So, okay, well, thanks again for having me here today. So, yeah, so I'm here to present the consolidated financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2023. So these statements, they're consolidated, so they include all operating capital activities, the library, water and sewer, as well as the town's proportionate share of the landfill, North Renfrew landfill sites, 52%, and the Pembroke Area Airport Commission, which is 8%. There's amortization of capital assets included. So these statements, they're primarily for external users, the province, lenders, bonding agencies. There's another statement, it's called the FIR, that's kind of a more detailed report that the province gets that's used for statistical analysis, and that sort of thing. So the next page is the management report. So this is required under the Public Sector Accounting Board. That management signs off on the statements. The next page is the index to the financial statements, so it lists all the different statements and schedules that are included in the statements. Then let's see, independent auditors report. So it's addressed to members of council, inhabitants, and ratepayers of the corporation of the Town of Deep River. We have audited the consolidated financial statements of the corporation of the Town of Deep River, which comprises consolidated statement of financial position as of December 31st, 2023, and consolidated statements of operations, change in net financial assets, net debt, and cash flows for the year then ended. Includes notes to the financial statements. So in our opinion, except for the possible effects below, which I'll discuss, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the corporation of the Town of Deep River as of December 31st, 2023, and then the results of its operations, change in net assets, etc. These statements are in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So, so the qualifications, there's new, spoke about this at the audit committee. So there's new asset retirement obligation standards issued by the Public Sector Accounting Board. So these require municipalities and public sector entities to record liabilities for asset retirement obligations like today instead of in the future. So under these standards, basically is and it's in our management report, we've concluded that we weren't able to get sufficient audit evidence over the accuracy of the estimate. So what we're suggesting for next year is hiring like an expert engineer that can kind of put a value on that, something that like a third party report that we can be audited. So yeah, besides that, it is a clean audit, and that's just one minor part of the statements, but include everything else is considered clean audit opinion. So there's some notes here about so that standard has been recorded retroactively, so the comparative figures have been adjusted as well. So the rest of the report outlines management's responsibilities for the fair presentation of the financial statements. Also outlines our responsibilities as auditors, which is to basically to obtain reasonable assurance about whether or not the consolidated financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, and then to issue a report includes our opinion. So kind of gets into all the different things we do. So statements are currently in draft format, once they're approved by council, we'll be able to get rid of the draft watermark and issue the final signed report. So the next page, page 7, is the consolidated statement of financial position. So what this statement is, basically it's a snapshot of where things stood with the town as at December 31st, 2023. So the bottom line, so accumulated surplus, so you have an accumulated surplus of 22,835,977, so that's up from the previous year. Note that the previous year was adjusted downwards because of this new asset retirement obligation liability. So it was previously stated 24.8 million, that's 21.3, but an increase this year. So that 22.8 million is comprised of, you had financial assets of 4.25 million, less financial liabilities, 17.7 million. So that gets you to a net debt of 13.5 million. So slight increase from the previous year. And then you add in your non-financial assets. So tangible capital assets are at net book value of 36.2 million, so up from the previous year. Inventory supplies, prepaid expenses. So all that gets you to your accumulated surplus. Digging in a bit more detail. So if you look at financial assets, so cash was up almost 600,000 year over year, just comparing the end of the year. The end of 22 was quite low. Investment 630,000. There's taxes receivable 592,000, so that's up from 363,000. So there's still talked about this at the previous meeting, but we still consider low risk for tax collections. And there's no allowance for doubtful accounts in there because of the municipality's ability to put liens on properties. There's nothing that we consider that all collectible. Trade and other receivables, so it's that 1.9 million, so it's very similar last year, quite high. Includes 775,000 from ACL, 401,000 for HST rebates, 227,000 from the Deep River Hospital, as well as 95,000 water and sewer receivables. Loans receivable 187,000. A little bit of inventory for resale. On the liability side, so at the end of December, so there's 2.6 million of accounts payable. So that includes normal bills, payroll accruals, that sort of thing. So the big difference this year that the final installment to the county, 641,000, was paid after year end. So it was outstanding as of December 31st, whereas the previous year it was paid. So that's the big variance year over year. Then you've got deferred revenue general, 37,000, deferred revenue obligatory reserves, just development charges, 146,992. Long-term liabilities, 7.4 million, so down from 7.9 million last year. So there was no new debt this year, just the regular debt repayments. It's the indicator for your borrower debt servicing costs, your borrowing, you're actually right on the cusp of being at low risk for that financial indicator. So that's good. Employee benefits and post-employment liabilities, 1.7 million, so similar to the previous year. And then asset retirement obligations, which is new this year, 5.7 million. So that's basically well, there's a note that explains it, but it's primarily for asbestos removal of buildings, as well as landfill obligations. So moving on, next page is your statement of operations. So good news, you had an annual surplus of 1.484 million this year. So last year was a deficit of 886. So good result there. So that surplus is equal to the increase in your accumulated surplus. So start year 21.3 million and year 22.8 million. So that 1.484 million, town had 15.6 million of revenues, less 14.15 million of expenditures. Revenues are comprised of taxation payments in lieu, a little over 8 million. User charges 4.4 million, so that most, 3.479 million of that is water and sewer charges. Government transfers 992,000. So user charge was up previous year, government transfers down. And then other revenues, so 2.179 million. So that's the big variance year over year. And the reason is included in that 2.1 million is ACL settlement of 1.578 million. Also for building permits was up 102,000 year over year. On the expenditure side, so we do include, so PSAB requires us to include budgeted figures there. But you know, one difference between actual include amortization of capital assets where the budget does not. So that's, and some of the variances might look off, but that's the reason. So really the prior year is the kind of better comparator if you're just looking for something to compare it to. So general government spend is 1.86 million, 1.75 million last year. Protection persons and property, 3.778 million this year, 4.59 million this year, so big decrease. Transportation services, 1.7 million this year, 1.42 million last year. Environmental services, yeah, very close to last year, 4.278 versus 4.274. Health services, 70,000, so that's up from last year. Recreation and cultural services, 2.227 million, from 2.161 million last year. And planning and development, 198,000 this year, 203,000 last year. So that's the statement of operations for the year ended December 31st, 23. So next statement shows your change in net financial assets, in your case, net debt. So improvement of 390,000 year over year. So basically we take that annual surplus from the previous page and then adjust for non-financial assets to get to that figure there. Next is your statement of cash flows. So your cash position went up by 587,000 from 330 to 918 end of year. So that just looking at it from by categories, so operating activities, so that's the bulk of the town activities. You generated 4.35 million cash from that. Out of that, then you use 3.27 million to purchase capital assets, slight change in investments, and then you paid down long-term liabilities, 483,000. So that explains the change in cash position. Next page into the schedules now. So schedule 1 shows the continuity of reserves. So you had started the year with 4.59 million of reserves. End of the year, you're down to 4,088,000. And so you can see the big ticket items here, your bigger ticket items, 400,000 set aside for sick leave, payroll contingencies. 215,000 for waterworks, 524,000 for sewer, working funds, 885,000, asset replacement, 369,000, service modernization, 481,000. Then a number of others. It's also reserve funds on the next page, so just similar reserves. So there's 276,000 for capital asset replacement, 394,000 hydro sale proceeds, and 74,000 for the airport operations included in that figure. The next page, deferred revenue obligatory for these, again, similar reserves. It's kind of money set aside for the future. So yeah, it's development charges, 146,992 is included in that figure at the end of the year. The next schedule 4 is your consolidated schedule of tangible capital assets. So shown by, apologize for the small print, but lot of numbers there. It's separated by asset class and then below by functional classification. So overall, your cost of all assets from inception, 74.8 million. They've been depreciated over time by 38.5 million, so they show up on your statement of financial position at 36.296 million at the end of 2023. Next schedule 5 is your scheduled accumulated surplus, so it's that number that's on the statement of financial position. So this kind of breaks down kind of where all the money is. So as discussed, yeah, 752,000 reserve funds, 3.3 million of reserves, so reserves and reserve funds, 4,088,000. Then we add in various surpluses, so there's 26.1 million invested in tangible capital assets, so that's basically the assets less the debt associated with it. 108,000 general reserve fund, 44,000 from landfill operations, and then we deduct some unfunded liabilities, so 1.7 million for employee benefits and post-employment liabilities, and then 5.7 million for new asset retirement obligations. So again, it gets you to the 22.835 million accumulated surplus. Rest segmented disclosures, so these numbers, totals mass statement of operation, this just shows it by segment. So I won't go through that. Yeah. Then into the notes to the financial statements, these are an important part of the statements, so note 1 describes some of the significant accounting policies. They're all pretty standard for municipalities, not a lot of choice there. I'll just mention that, yeah, I mentioned already, but the airport and landfill included, proportionate consolidated basis. Skip it ahead. Yeah, maybe I'll jump ahead to note 2. So there's restricted cash. So there's cash of 634,000 to support reserve funds and deferred revenue obligatory. Note 3, investments. So in your statement of financial position, you have 630,000 investments, 613,000 is in bonds, and then 17,000 mutual funds. So that's actually your share of airport mutual funds. Loans receivable, so last year you had 2 loans, so this year the Mount Martin Ski Hill loan has been paid off in full, so it's just the WESO Communication Technologies loan for high-speed internet. About 187,595 at the end of the year. Note 5, long-term liabilities. So as mentioned, there's no new loans this year. So I'll go through the loans in a bit more detail. So the first loan through RBC, it was originally for the sewer plant, so it's at 848,000 at the end of the year. The next few loans are through Ontario. They're debentures through Ontario Infrastructure. So the first one was for the water treatment plant, so it's 5.42% at 3.594 million owing on that. The next one is for Ridge Road, so it's down to 120,000, 4.12%. Then we've got some other debentures, 2.9%, so that was for recreation facilities, so there's 944,000 going on that. 3.5% debentures, that was for the pool, 1,048,000 going on that one. And then water capital, 844,000 at 3.14%. As well, there's another debenture that's shared, it's your portion of the airport hangar is 19,000 a year. Then below that shows we pay them off just in accordance with the schedule. Those are the repayments principal. Also get into the interest, so total interest was 345,000 on long-term liabilities, and kind of shows kind of which funds it was taken out of below. Note 6, employment benefits and post-employment liabilities. There's a few buckets of liabilities there. So there's the end of the year, 139,000 of free vacation pay benefits, 586,000 of sick leave owing, Post-employment benefits, so that's, the town provides various medical and life insurance benefits to employees after they retire, so that's an based on actuarial estimates, 921,000. And WSIB, 123,000, is you're on a pay-as-you-go basis as a Schedule II employer. Note 7, requires, there's a standard for contaminated sites, so there's been no liabilities recognized there. Note 8, break down your revenues into more detail, so as you can see, under the taxation, residential farm taxation's up 6.4 million from 6.19. Commercial is also up 961,000 from 871 previous year. Taxation from other governments is down 4,096,000 from 4.228 last year. Then we deduct the town collects school board revenue, so that comes off that to get to the 8,061,000. It shows up on the statement of operations. User charges are up 4.4 million from 2.8. As mentioned, it's mostly water and sewer. Government transfers is down, so it's mostly the province above budget, but 960,000. The previous year was higher, 1.126 million. And then other revenues, so stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else we put here, so we have to generate 118,000 investment income, 39,000 penalties and interest on taxes, donations, and other. So other includes that ACL settlement, the 1.57. So that's the big variance there. So total revenue is 15.64 million. So the statement of operations shows expenses by object or by function. It shows it by object. So salaries, benefits, interest, materials, amortization, and accretion. Note 10 just talks about the commerce, kind of as the employees are part of that, so there's some information there about that. Financial instruments, that's a required note. PSAB, you have to disclose financial instrument risks. Note 12 shows, so the two joint local boards. So we've got the Pemberton area airport, the town shares 8.076% of those. So we've got total figures there as well as the town share, which are included in the statements, as well as the North Renfrew Landfill Operations Board. So town shares 52% of this board. So again, we've got total and share. Note 13, so towns, so this PSAB again requires you to disclose contractual obligations and commitments. So these are the ones we've identified. There's the waste disposal contract, Miller's Road landfill contract, Ontario Clean Water Agency agreement, and the North Renfrew Landfill Operations Board. So details there. The town also administers cemetery trust funds, so there's a separate statement for that. So those funds are not included in these statements, but we just do disclose in the notes the balance in that account. Contingent liabilities, again, this is a required note, so there's one issue we're aware of, but we don't know. Included is settlement amount not determinable. There could be other issues as well. The town believes there's valid defenses and insurance in place to cover that, so no accruals booked for contingent liabilities. Note 16 just talks about the budget. So those amounts are not audited, and they don't include depreciation, so in some places they're not that comparable. Note 17 just describes kind of the segment disclosures, kind of what's all included in those different categories. Note 18, so subsequent events to the year end, there were contracts and settlements totaling approximately 1.7 million settled after year end, so that'll show up in next year's statements. Note 19, there was was discovered, there was a prior period error of 25,987 on the sick leave liability, relating to the library, so that has been adjusted in these current statements, so results in a decrease of accumulated surplus 25,987. Note 20, yeah, some of the, just note that some of the comparative figures have been reclassified. And then note 21, changes to accounting standards, so the big one this year, all municipalities, is asset retirement obligation standard, BS 3280. So it requires municipalities to account for legal obligations associated with tangible capital assets controlled by the government or a government organization. So this was adopted as of January 31st, 2023 on a modified retrospective basis with prior period restatement. So this replaces the previous solid waste landfill closure and post liability standard. So as a result, skip to the bottom, page 32, you can see the financial statement impacts. So previous year, we had landfill closure and post closure liability, 658,000. Now so that's been eliminated to zero. And now there's this new asset retirement obligation, 5.635 million. Now, some of these obligations it's hard to explain, that occurred a long time ago, so basically it's added to the original cost and then amortized. So there is also an increase to your tangible capital assets, 1.486 million. So the impact on your accumulated surplus went down from 24.842 million down 3.491 million to 21.35. And that's as at December 31st, 22. Next page, there was some other new standards this year, been concluded, didn't really have much impact on the town statements. Fortunately, yeah, foreign currency translation, portfolio investments, financial instruments. So note 22 on page 34, near the end. So the town just talks about the asset retirement obligations in more detail. So the big two items in there are the landfill obligations and then asbestos and other obligations. So there's town operates their own landfill site. So that's included in here. So the calculation includes the present value of expected. There's two aspects of it. There's the actual closure costs and then post-closure care. So that's all been factored in and discounted to today's dollars. So that resulted in a liability of 1.116 million. It's also the part of the North Renfrew Landfill Operations Board, so that your share, so the total obligation there was calculated at 501,000, town share of that 260,000. And then asbestos and other obligations, so this has to do with buildings owned by the town. So when they're decommissioned, there'll be some costs associated with removing asbestos. So the amount recorded in the statements for that, 4.14 million. And basically it's accreted at today's dollars. Every year it gets bumped up a little bit, so total accretion expense in 22 was 137,000, and then accretion expense, which is in your statement of operations, 141,000 for 2023. Any questions on that? I know it's a lot, but
Mr. Sinclair, could you speak to where the value for the asbestos and other removals came from? Like, is it a number that staff have generated, or it's
yes,
a value of a building with a factor on it? Or
basically, yeah, there was some figures provided by the county to assist based on square footage and that, so that's how. It was, come up with different classifications of buildings, so. Again, yeah, that's what we're suggesting next year get a more formal engineer to. Come up with the figure, but it is an estimate.
Council, any questions for financial statement? So we want to thank you for going through it and detail. I know the audit committee has already discussed it with you today, but the rest of us, we appreciate that you've gone through it. You know, I have a couple of small questions. Yeah, well, the asset retirement obligation was one, and sort of where that came from. One question I had was, how much reserves, like, I think you made a comment about our cash flow was too low, and then other things are kind of more high, that our cash flow is like more high risk, or cash counts, and whereas, reserves are medium, and other things are low. How much is enough, and how do you determine that? Like, is it, what factors do you look at when you, I know you're using a provincial
Yeah,
standard, so what do they look at when they do that?
so the provincial standards, yeah, so I don't know if I mentioned this meeting or the previous meeting, but the province has 7 financial indicators. So I just took your numbers and plugged them in, so 3 you're considered low risk for 3, moderate risk for 3, and high risk for 1, and that particular one was your cash, so your cash ratio, so you look at your total cash compared to your total current liabilities. So that's how that, so they're suggesting. So to be low risk, if it's less than 50%. So I'm calculating it, your cash compared to your current liabilities, 8.7%, so yeah, it should be quite a bit higher. Just to have
Right,
operating capital.
so when you're looking at our accounts and where money is being held in investments or whatever, we should be looking at those types of
Well, I think-
balancing
I
aspects.
think part of it, we paid for a lot of capital in recent years out of
Yeah.
operating cash, so I think there's looking at some new debt finance, so once you get the debt in place, should rectify.
Right, which wasn't in the 2023 audit, because we put it in 2023.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, council? At what point does, we're using taxpayer money, for example, so is there ever a point where you have too much in reserves and, like, not our problem, obviously, we have a lot of capital liabilities, but is there, like, I'm sure there's situations where you could have too many reserves for your taxpayers, like you're holding too much of their money, so there must be a balance there.
Yeah, there's a reserve, first off, I don't know if there's ever too much reserves, I think reserves are a good
It's a good
thing.
thing,
You are low risk for your reserve, so that's, means you have, compared to your revenue, comparing your reserve to your discretionary revenue.
just thinking of that situation where you would raise, the tax rate to continue to bring taxes in, but maybe you have a lot of reserves, there must be a balance where you don't take too much money from the taxpayer if you've got certain investments. I know we're not in that case, we're trying to build up our water and sewer reserves because they were too low, I think, when
Yeah,
they were $40,000 for water, which is, $20,000 system, it wasn't much, but.
right,
I
yeah,
just wondered if that's something that's ever considered.
I think you gotta look at it like bucket by bucket, like. I don't know if there's
Okay, so you determine it by your assets, basically what you need.
Yes.
Okay. You don't have to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, your worship. So I asked this earlier in the meeting, but I think it's worth asking again. When it comes to the employee benefits and post-employee liabilities, we've got 4 things listed: vacation, sick leave, post-employment benefits, and WSIB, to the tune of 1.77 million. And then, as far as I can tell, we have approximately, to cover all of that, 472,000. The question I had is there a magic formula that we can use to understand how much we should have in reserve to cover those future liabilities?
Yeah, and again, it's a tough. Because you don't know when those liabilities are gonna come to fruition, except, depends on when people retire and that, I would say, an effort to continually grow them is pragmatic. But again, I'm not. It's a tough, balancing act, right? Your current taxpayer versus future taxpayers, like who should be paying for these things,
Right.
So you'll recall it's a discussion we had when we're doing budget is how much do we allocate to those reserve funds each year, so. And we just put something in there, so what's enough, what's not enough,
Is there,
so we'll rely on staff to give us some answers at some point.
Mr. Howard, you want?
Your worship, through the council, just because of timing, I think it's really worth mentioning. Premier Ford announced today that he's returning 2.5 billion out of WSIB surpluses, so. Too much is too much.
There we go. There's
The
the
other
situation.
thing that's worth noting is a shift from our old sick leave program to short-term disability, long-term disability has significantly reduced that liability growing. So it was growing rapidly when everybody was on that plan. That accumulated sick leave is now in frozen sick banks. It's slowly getting whittled down for a significant portion of our employees.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Whatever.
Just the relationship between, Mr. Sinclair talked about, some of the FIR numbers and our cash position being, at a high risk. But on the other hand, our debts and our debt repayment was on a low position. If we had another project that we debt financed and it actually created cash. So my question is, where's the balance between, could we actually borrow money to increase our cash flow and lower that risk and not increase our risk on our debt repayment side? Do that calculation.
Well, I think, so your debt it may be low now, but I calculated, so the moderate risk for debt servicing costs, the range is 5 to 10%. I calculated at 5.3%, so you're kind of at the cusp of the moderate to low. So I would suggest you probably, you don't want to get into the high risk category of each, but if you could stay within the moderate risk for debt servicing costs, but get back to the moderate risk for cash ratio, I think that would work.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just have one other, I think you made a comment in your presentation and it's in the audit here for cash owing, taxes receivable, 500,000 owing, and before that it was 300 and some thousand. What are we, is this a sign of the times? Is this, like, what are we looking at? Is that significant? And, well, obviously we should be dealing with that, but,
Yeah,
yeah, is that something we should be concerned about, because that number's gone up.
Well, I think it's a trend across the province, certainly taxes receivable are going up from what I'm seeing. Again, the town, we don't worry about it too much, basically, until the liability reaches a point where the town does have the ability to lien properties and register properties for tax sales, so that's a very powerful tool that can be used to collect back taxes, so I don't think, I mean, it's certainly something to monitor, but it's not something.
We're not off the scale, in terms of other municipalities. at this
Yeah, and you're still in the low.
Okay.
Low risk category there, even with the
Thank you.
increase.
Councilor Myers?
On that topic, I don't know if, this is just based on, I know when we received financial statements in the past, Deep River's always been considered to be very good on that. Because I believe there are municipalities where the taxes receivable are like 20% of their taxes, and we're like even looking at the taxation number from last year, like we're well under 10%. Well, I guess it depends which number you look at. Anyway, we're certainly under 10%. Anyway, so I think, I mean, I agree, it's certainly not something you want to get out of hand. My question was, it's not specific to anything in these statements, and perhaps it's as much a question to staff as it is to our auditor. I'm very happy to see that we've got our 2023 financial statements done. I would think that a healthy sort of audit cycle would be, you close the year, obviously the year ends December 31st, it's gonna take a few months to make all the adjustments and all that kind of stuff, but presumably we would want to see the audit done in the spring and financial statements before half the year is gone. Do we know, are we on track to maybe see that in 2020, like for the 2024 statements? Sorry, I know, as I said, it's probably not a question for you as much as it is for staff.
Mr. Patterson or Ms. Taylor? Yeah. Sorry, I don't think we can hear.
That's not there.
Okay,
Your worship, through the council, for next year's audit, we are actually going out with a new auditor. We're just RFPing that tomorrow. We expect, because of the late date with the RFP, that we probably will not have statements next year until June or July. Really depends on if we can find a firm that will pick us up. And that sums it up.
Your worship, through the council, I would just add that it's late to go to market for it. And working with Baker Tilly through this, we're catching up. We're in much better shape than we were in 2022, and we'll be in better shape in 2020. We're better shape on our 23 audit than we were in our 22 audit, and we'll be in better shape for our 24 audit. And we will be right back on track for our 25 audit. So we'll be only anticipate maybe a couple of months behind next year, because we're not at the front of the queue for every vendor.
Thank you, and yeah, I think we discussed the challenges with 2022 last year around this time as well, maybe even later. Go ahead.
No, and I realize we've been playing catch up and there's been a lot of challenges, and I'm glad that we're on track and yeah, I'm glad to hear we're still progressing though.
Any final questions or comments for our auditor tonight? Okay, I'm seeing none. I'm gonna thank him for attending council and our audit committee meeting today, and we'll call the vote on receiving your report, and sincere thanks for presenting tonight and for providing this information for us. Much appreciated. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, moving on. To our, a minute, I got that. So we've got updates by staff and council, so we're point to notices and information by members of staff and council. Let's we'll look to Mr. Patterson or Mr. Kaiser to give any updates from staff, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, for your council. There are a number of notices this evening. On behalf of Mr. McCarthy, I would like to thank all the people who put tremendous effort into the parade and Christmas tree lighting activities. A great, by all accounts, great demonstration of community spirit, so I think it was a tremendous success. Also, a thank you to sponsors for the upcoming free public skates over the holidays. So go to our website, you'll find in the NRT a good schedule with lots of sponsored public skates. A reminder, helmets are required. Pool updates. Weather has not necessarily cooperated with our roofing job at this time of the year. So we are not going to get open before the holidays, but the target date for reopening is January 8th. And lastly, a reminder to folks that snow removal is happening, the parking rules changed. Please don't park on the street. It causes a lot of extra work to go back and clean that up afterwards, and costs a lot of money for overtime and things like that. We've got our town hall closure over the holidays, which is, will be closed at noon on the 24th, which is next Tuesday, and will be reopening the morning of January 2nd. And lastly, I would, on behalf of staff, like to wish council and the community a Merry Christmas, a safe and happy holiday. And one more thing, Mr. Kaiser has to add.
Thank you, Worship. Through to council, just a quick verbal update on the Palmers Bay or Wintergreen official plan amendments. The applicant is working through the responses that we got during the public meeting at last council meeting, and we should be seeing an updated version of that and potentially a decision in front of council in the January meeting, so the January 15th.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Kaiser. Council, any questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Going to council now. Any updates from members of council for tonight? Okay, I have a couple of things. Last week I got to attend county council as a guest, as did the mayor of Renfrew and the mayor of Arnprior, as none of us sit on county council. It was the inaugural meeting in the election of the warden, so that was nice. I try and do that every year. I delivered a message about the importance of the electrical sector, not only to our climate, but to our local and county economy, and the need to embrace that and try and build on that. We also recently had several police board meetings, and then I also participated in some media interviews about the OPP funding and the fact that our residents and small municipal police forces like ours are not being treated equitably by the province in terms of rural subsidies for policing costs. Unfortunately, so we've got some work to do there, and we'll be talking about that later tonight. Today I attended another meeting with the Deep River District Health and my fellow mayors regarding physician recruitment. We're meeting about once a month now. And just wanted to update that Deep River District Health are collectively working on recruitment and international recruitment. They also have pairs of medical students coming in on 4-month rural rotations throughout the year. So we've got one group pair of 2 students from Queens who are here until February, and then another pair coming February to June or late May, and then June to September. And one of the things that they're being supported by all the local docs, because they all need supervision. So it's a bit of a task for our doctors to take that on, but they're doing that, and so that's great because it's one of the most successful ways of getting physicians to your community if they had a good experience here. And so that's what we're trying to do. But what the hospital told us today is that they are challenged with continuing to find good housing for medical students or part-time doctors who work in our emergency. So any ideas people have, we're working on some ideas, but any other ideas people have to help with supporting sort of housing the medical students who may not have cars, they might have to walk or bike to our hospital. Those are things that the hospital could really use. The other major issue they have is access to daycare for all their young staff. They have 2 ultrasonographers and they're down to 1 because the one that has a new child can't get daycare. And they're down a physiotherapist for a similar reason. So it's a common problem for their PSWs, nurses, many staff. So we do have some ideas, but if members of the community have ideas they want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. And at this time, I, on behalf of council, want to wish our staff and everyone in our community a Merry Christmas and a wonderful and safe New Year. So back at you, Mr. Patterson. Anyways, that's any questions for me on any of that? Councillor Payton, go.
Not so much a question, one more thank you, the mayor, as well as around 49 or 54, I think there's somewhere around 50 people participated in the hospital foundation's polar dip a week ago. Mayor said if they raised $25,000, she'd jump in the river. They raised over $35,000 is what they said when I was down there, so well done to that group for that fun, chilling experience.
Yeah, that was fun. And thanks to Councillor Fitton for being the MC of the evening or the day as he often is, so that was really important too. Okay, as we have no notices of motion and no deputations tonight, we're moving to the consent agenda.
There was a deputation to Nether Lake, did they not never to that?
Excuse me, under our procedural bylaws, those have to be way ahead of 4 o'clock on the day of. It's-
I'm not
yeah.
sure what there was supposed to be
Yeah,
a
no.
position.
Those are standard rules.
There's no deputations.
There's no deputation.
No deputations were
Deputy,
received
received or requested.
or requested by the deadline.
Deputation means somebody comes here and delivers it to you.
There was no deputation or question.
Moving to consent matters, correspondence. So we're going through, correspondence for tonight, and I'm going to ask, Councillor Hughes, please, to move our consent agenda.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Giardini, be it resolved that all of the proposed resolutions shown in section 6.1 correspondence of the agenda be approved and adopted by council in the order that they appear on the agenda as sequentially numbered.
Thank you, Councillor. So we're moving through the items in the consent agenda, and if anybody wishes to make a comment on it or extract and change the motion from received. So the first items are their Ontario Municipal Council resolutions. Does anybody wish to bring one of those forward tonight?
200 that are there.
200. A lot of them are repetitious. 6.1.1 County of Brantford Council Summary Update. Is Tina Poplinski, Media Relations and Social Media Coordinator. I hope everybody had a chance to read that. I don't know if there's anything you want to add about that, Reeve. Just it's all pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, well, sorry, thank you, worship. Just an update, I probably could have done this earlier, but forgot. So at the inaugural meeting, certainly we did elect Peter as a warden for the, could have this wrong, seventh time, I believe. So congratulations, Peter. He certainly spent a lot of time in it, and it's Yeah, pretty much full-time job, I do believe. And just further to that, I was reappointed as the chair of the operations committee, where I believe I hold the record for spending $12 million in 37 minutes, or approving spending of that. And it's not difficult when you get the reports from council, or reports from staff that, basically, explain the tenders and the awards of tenders, so that's what we did do. So further to that, I would be a member of the Finance and Administration Committee, and through operations, I get the privilege to sit on the County Trails Committee. That's not the right term for it, but that one, and also county council's appointment to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities altogether. But if there's anything else in that council report, it's fairly light report, that I would be more willing to answer or try to.
Awesome. I did know that they were successful in 2 grants for charging stations at county council building and the Renfrew County building for 6 units at each, which is a lot of money. If they could give us any help in getting some of those, that'd be appreciated. Because I think we've applied, but we have not, if I'm looking at staff, I don't believe we've been successful yet to get it.
They were class 2 chargers, I believe.
Yeah, your worship, through the council, we applied for 2 level 3 charges outside our town hall here. We were not successful in that application. The county applied for 6 level 2 charges, which are the ones that you take a much longer time to charge.
I see. Thank you.
So more geared towards staff and visitors there.
Okay. Thanks for the update, Reeve. Any questions for the Reeve or wish to extract? Seeing none, we're gonna go to 6.1.2, province's OPP rebated North Small Towns with their own police force service, Mayor Neil Ellis, Mayor of Belleville. And I will extract that and bring it forward at our consent or our extracted items. So we'll keep moving. 6.1.3, same topic. About OPP subsidies and a letter from the president of the Ontario Chiefs of Police. Any comment or wish to extract? Go ahead.
So just a quick comment, that was the one from Belleville, I believe.
That was the one before, which I extracted. You want the chief of police one?
We're good.
Okay. Okay, we can talk about that. 6.1.4, introduction of proposed Municipal Accountability Act 2024, Honorable Paul Calandra, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And everybody had a chance to read that. I know that was something that a lot of municipalities have been waiting for. Any comment or wish to extract? Reeve, go ahead.
I just wondered if maybe we could get staff to give us an opinion on where we're going with this.
Anybody feel comfortable to speak to this tonight?
Sure, thank you, your worship, through the council. I think this is consistent, it's been a long time coming. At the last AMO conference, there was substantial outcry from municipalities regarding legislation that just didn't have any teeth and couldn't do anything about accountability issues. There's been ongoing discussions about abuses of the integrity commissioner system and inconsistencies of the system. And what this appears to be is a commitment to work on specific frameworks that would see a common code of conduct that the province would expect all municipal councils to adopt. The second piece in it is a commitment to provide oversight to integrity commissioners. Right now, each municipality hires its own integrity commissioner. And there are some lawyers out there that are, in essence, just that's what they do. They are integrity commissioners for 20 or 30 or 40 municipalities. But they may react completely different to another one. So This would provide one training for integrity commissioners, a municipal integrity commissioner, a mandatory training, and it would provide oversight by Ontario's integrity commissioner for any municipal integrity commissions. I think that summarizes the main points that are contained in the letter.
Thanks, Mr. Patterson. Any further comment or question or wish to extract the letter from Minister Calandra? Okay, I think that is all we have for correspondence, save and accept the motion from Bill 6.1.2. So we'll call the vote on receiving correspondence. All in favor? That's carried. Moving to minutes. Councillor Giardini, can you move our minutes from the last meeting, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hughes, be it resolved that all the proposed resolutions shown in section 6.2 minutes of the agenda be approved and adopted by council in the order that they appear on the agenda and sequentially numbered.
Thank you, Councillor. Any comments, questions around the minutes? I do have a comment or question for staff, but if anybody else has anything they want to add. I did have a question from a resident, with regard to the minutes of public meetings, from the last public meeting, where they submit letters in response to a proposal. And those letters are typically part of the report that comes on that proposal. But I think there's also a question about should they be in the minutes of the meeting. And my understanding is all those are not necessarily part of the minutes of the meeting, but I just wondered if there's any comment or question staff wish to provide on that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the council, the Planning Act doesn't require those representations to be included in the minutes of the council meeting. Typical practice, though, is to include them in the planning report that goes to council as part of the recommendation on the decision.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments with regard to the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, seeing none, we're going to call the vote on the minutes as moved. All in favor? That's carried. And now we're into reports. We have 3 reports tonight. You get the motion read on that. Councillor Myers, can you please move the reports?
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Vaughn, be it resolved that all of the proposed resolutions shown in section 6.3 reports of the agenda be approved and adopted by council in the order that they appear on the agenda and sequentially numbered.
Thank you, Councillor. So we're starting with 6.3.1, report 2024 finance 022 reserve and reserve fund policy updated by Elaine Taylor, Director of Finance and our Treasurer. And it is a motion that the policy be received, that we approve the reserve and reserve fund policy, and that the corporate policies and procedures manual is amended. And I know we given some comments back at our last meeting, so Ms. Taylor, you have the floor. Thanks for the update.
Your worship, through you to council. So the update on the reserve and reserve fund policy, basically we moved Schedule A at this time. We will bring it back in January or February of 2025 for council to discuss and approve. But just the wording tonight is what we're looking for approval on in the policy, and what we changed in the wording was we added a paragraph under scope that said that any transfers to or from reserves or reserve funds held on behalf of the local board must be approved by the local board prior to being approved by council, including any interfund borrowing. So hopefully that resolved the question that council had.
Council, any questions, comments, or wish to extract this report? Councillor Hughes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just question on the scope, just so I'm clear. So at our policy, which is attached here, and it's fairly new for us too as well, to have this administrative, so that the need for council approval is actually new. So I believe our policy, our meeting, the library policy says we will allocate funds from our reserves during the budget process. So I would assume that if once council approves the budget, that is an approval of the transfer, correct? Of the allocation of reserves, and there's not like a separate approval needed.
Yes, that is correct. I think that I was under the impression that the concern last council was with respect to interfund borrowing.
Yeah, so that's, I just wanted to clarify that part. So the inter-fund borrowing, which I think the concern was from, you know, I don't know when it would happen under what circumstances, but, you know, sewer reserve, they want to take money from the library. So the way it's written now, it says the local board would need to approve before council. So I assume also that means that if they don't approve, it doesn't go further. That,
Exactly.
like, it's not just a sequence thing, it needs both approvals and the local board would be the first.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Taylor. We're moving to the next one. Report 2024 Public Works 016 Recycling Collection, the amending agreement. Sean Patterson, Chief Administrative Officer. Mr. Patterson, you have the floor.
Thank you, your worship, through your council. Relatively straightforward. Number of reports have come to council regarding the Blue Box Transition Program for Ontario. Starting January 1st, we had to tackle January 1st of 2025 to December 31st of 2025 is for us, it's considered the transition year. So for the transition year, council previously passed a resolution to extend our current contract with our provider to allow for them to collect the non-eligible sources. We will also be collecting effective data, which we haven't previously had on those volumes. So this basically amends the agreement for them to collect the non-eligible sources at a rate of $200 a metric ton and extended for a period of 1 year. Not to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions from council? As council is aware, the new Blue Box program doesn't pay to collect commercial and institutional waste, which then leaves us to basically pay for that. It's not terribly helpful, so.
Certainly, and your worship, it's worth noting that we will be coming to council in the third quarter of this year with the data we have so far, with a recommendation on what to do January 1, 2026. Because we won't be able to wait until the 11th hour on making a decision on how to go forward with it. So we'll spend the first 6 months collecting data. We'll evolve, it'll inform a strategy and proposal to council on how to go forward with the Blue Box program for the non-eligible sources, assuming there's no change in legislation or direction from the province.
What I was gonna ask, I've noticed there's been a lot of lobbying by the municipalities to fix this obvious problem. Is that something that, have you heard if anything's being done?
We really haven't heard anything from the province about anything being done. I expect at the Roma conference in January, it's going to be a bit of a hot button topic, particularly because I think the program is very city focused. It really didn't deal with the non-eligible sources really well. And that's primarily because all the larger centers, the commercial base was already independent of the municipal residential collection system. So they were already doing their own recycling. So it tends to be more of a small town issue that I think was maybe not totally thought out when they put it together, and we're struggling with the implementation side. So I expect it to be a significant conversation at Rome.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions? Councilor Von, go ahead.
Thank you, your worship. Do we have a up-to-date list of the non-eligible locations, or not residency, but businesses and facilities? And is there going to be communication for those folks on what changes may occur with this?
Certainly, your worship, through the council, there will be no impact to anybody. So the same contractor is going to pick up on the same schedule, the same day. The only difference will be, is in essence, what they will do is they'll do that ICI route and is the non-eligible group first, which is commonly done at the same time anyway. And then, so in essence, they use a tearaway system. So they'll wait to, that's where we start to collect the data and they know what the bill is. Then they'll go out and continue their collection cycle on the residential side. So it's not going to change the schedule. Now, when we go to propose something in the third quarter of 2025 for the next year, that's where we might see a completely different, significant change. So no change to any of the recycles, collection schedules or anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reeve Doncaster, go ahead.
Did we buy a weigh scale or how are we measuring the volume?
We measure it at Alice or wherever the recycling goes, I believe. Oh,
No, Mr. McNulty will be installing a waste scale in the truck. So the truck will actually be the one that does that. Otherwise, the problem with doing it at the landfill site is that it's a long drive. And you wouldn't want to do that drive with half a load of commercial, and then come back and get half a load of residential and do it again. So weighing it there isn't going to be very feasible. It may be in the long run that through we've talked for years about putting a weigh scale potentially at Bags Road or Miller's Road. And I wouldn't be surprised if as part of the plan going forward, because also keep in mind that Laurentian Hills comes on board in 6 months from now on this. So once that happens, I suspect there will be sort of a joint proposal that Norlog purchase a weigh scale is likely going to be one of the outcomes.
I didn't know a truck could weigh itself.
no, I would not. Councillor Fitton, go ahead.
Or just with that information on how they're weighing it and collecting our data, just thinking of our non-eligible sources. I'm just wondering if there's a possibility to refine even further some of that data that we collect from Mr. McNulty. I'm just thinking some places out there are gonna produce a whole lot more from some of the commercial establishments than some of the other ones that are still gonna be not eligible.
Certainly, your worship, through you, council, Councillor Fitton raises a good point. I'm not sure we have the economies of scale or critical mass to make that one flow very well. So really what that comes down to is if we had, for example, moved to a recommendation where we had a model that the cost of commercial or non-eligible collection was not funded through the tax levy, but funded as a separate line item on the tax bill. If you had a small business in downtown core paying the same cost for recycle collection as, say, a Canadian Tire, a grocery store or something like that, it would be inequitable. And I think that that's the problem with that model. The issue there is the collection of that data and how it gets collected and the frequency. So our first 6 months, we're not really going to focus on that. We're going to start with the larger group. Just because we don't have any data to even anticipate what the impact of that will be. So you won't be able to inform anybody on what their cost would be until we find out what's the difference between the eligible body and the non-eligible body in terms of volume. So I've heard numbers from 15%, I've heard numbers from 40%. So we don't know where that lands. The WDO program never tracked that difference. We've never tracked that difference, so that first 6 months is gonna inform a lot. And really, I think give us a lot more information as at least a starting point on where to go with that. And it doesn't mean we wouldn't have further, extensions related to getting more data, on what's possible. The challenge here is, in essence, that provincial blue box program has taken the responsibility for determining what in the truck is eligible and non-eligible and put it right to the operators of the truck. With nobody in between, and that's a bit of a, you've just added a lot of responsibility to a group that is not used to that responsibility. So, that documentation, the whole list of how do you track that effectively and accurately is a significant challenge. So at this point, no.
Any other questions or comments, or wish to extract this report for a change in motion? Okay. Moving to our last report, report 2024, plan 06, 00 Avon Road zoning bylaw amendment application, Christian Kaiser, Director of Growth and Sustainability. There's a motion here that to receive the report, that council support the applicant's request to put the zoning bylaw amendment related to the property at Plan 331 Block N on hold, and that council delegate the authority to negotiate and amend the option to repurchase agreement between the town and 14092571 Canada Inc. to the CAO to allow an extension of the time periods before which the property must be developed. Mr. Kaiser, appreciate if you can give us a update. We've all read the reports, but any summary for you is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Through to council, a very short summary this evening. I think there are two major components to this report. The first is that we received a request from the applicant, Mr. Milton, that council defer their decision on this application. He would like to spend more time engaging with the community on the necessity and the benefits of the project he's proposing. And he also has several other projects on the go locally that he will use as maybe as a bench case or as an example. So and it's important to note that he hasn't withdrawn the application. He hasn't modified it in any way at this time. He has indicated that he will be bringing back this application in the future, but for now, it's he would like to defer that decision making. The second part of the report covers the staff's recommendation around the application. You will have seen that our county colleagues have written their report and would recommend to council in the future that this application be approved as it stands. That's in line with the provincial policy statements, which heavily encourage and require municipalities to support intensification in their municipal boundaries. The third part of the recommendation is around the agreement that we have with the owner of the property, Mr. Milton. When it was sold, at the time, council wanted to encourage the development of the small lots that the town sold. And that was done through a option to repurchase agreement. So every property that we sold, the owner was required to sign that agreement with the town. It allows the town to purchase back that agreement within a certain period of time, should development not occur. We are recommending to council that we extend the time periods that for this particular project or this particular property to allow Mr. Milton to come back to council and with a further application, and then in the future develop that property in some form. Right now, the time period we set was an 18-month period to apply for a building permit. That's expired, I think, in last month, in the last few weeks. So we would be extending that out into the future. We've allowed the CAO, we've asked that council allow the CAO to perform those negotiations because we're not exactly sure about the timing to come. Mr. Patterson, do you have something to add? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Yeah, we'll leave some questions for Mr. Kaiser. Go ahead.
No, I'd just like to extract this report, please.
Okay, we'll extract this report. Okay, so we will, move the motion on reports, save and accept item, 6.3.3, report 2024 plan 06. So we've had a motion moved for reports, all in favor. That's carried, so now we're going to our items extracted from the consent agenda. So I'll go back to the one that I extracted, which was correspondence from the mayor of Belleville. 6.1.2. So I would recommend that council have a mover and a seconder incorporating the same motion as the city of Belleville and the New Smith Falls and several other municipalities. Whereas on November 29th, 2024, the province of Ontario identified significant protective services cost pressures related to municipal policing and identified significant provincial funding to be provided to offset OPP cost increases for small and rural municipalities. And further, that the province recognized that it is also the case that those municipalities with local municipal police services continue to see significant cost increases and budgetary pressures in municipal policing, which are directly impacted by OPP policing labor costs. And further, that it be requested that the province treat all Ontario municipalities equitably with support and funding to assist managing these increasing costs of policing. And that such council resolution be forwarded to the Premier and the Solicitor General of Ontario. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder of that. Reeve Doncaster, Councillor Fitton, any discussion of the motion? So moved. Reeve Doncaster?
Yeah, thank you, your worship. So, well, certainly aware that the situation with the increase in costs, probably an average of about 20% across 17 municipalities in just Renfrew County. Because Deep River is the only one in Renfrew County that has our own force. So we don't have access to any of those funds that the province subsequently announced, as everybody was in an uproar about these increased costs that they had no control over moving forward. And then firstly, when the mayor of Belleville first spoke publicly about this on the CBC, he certainly mentioned Mayor Dion and the town of Deep River. I don't know if that spurred CTV coming to town and interviewing the mayor, but certainly had some the information put out there. So I think it's important that we do this and that the province treats all municipalities in the same way. We all have had costs that continue to increase, and there's really no reason why we should be excluded out of getting provincial funding for policing. A significant part of it is that we have our own police force, and our community is very happy with that. However, and this was always the case, part of the OPP costs are covered by all of the taxpayers of Ontario. But specifically on this $77 million, the increase in OPP costs are being put on all of the taxpayers in Ontario. But those funds are only going to 330 municipalities that have OPP, which in essence means that the residents of Deep River are subsidizing the OPP costs to our neighbors in 330 municipalities. So we need, that's it.
Thank you, Reeve. Anybody else wish to comment on this motion? Okay, seeing none, we won't belabor anything anymore. We'll call the vote on the motion as extracted. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you for your support. Next, we're going to the report on Avon. We've just had an update from Mr. Kaiser, so Councillor Myers, you distracted, I'll let you speak first. Go ahead.
Thank you. Even though the recommendation to put it on hold seems relatively simple, I think there's a lot to unpack here. And the major, I guess my first question would be, or my first, I'm happy with a recommendation to allow Mr. Patterson to negotiate an extension. But I believe that extension, the terms of that extension should come back to council for approval. Council identified this property as surplus. It's out, we put the conditions on as far as selling that property for it to be developed. I don't know if any kind of preliminary discussions have been held, but I don't want to end up in a situation where the owner puts it on hold and potentially the successive extensions or delays, like our intention for that property is for it to be developed. If he is not going to do that, perhaps we should repurchase it and find another buyer. So I guess that would be my first, so I would like to amend the motion that's on, well, I mean, we don't have a motion on the table, so I would move a motion similar to this, except in the final paragraph, instead of saying that we delegate the authority to negotiate and amend the option to repurchase agreement, I would say delegate the authority to negotiate an amendment to the option to repurchase with the proviso that that amendment would come back to council for approval. So I'll just leave it at that for.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Vaughn? Councillor Hughes?
So I support that. I guess my question would be, is it helpful to provide some scope of time that we think is okay? Like, you know, you don't want them to spend all this time negotiating, come back and say, oh, we'd like it to be longer. Like, it may be helpful if we can provide, you know, some sort of guideline, one extension of what they already have, or, you know, whatever, I don't know. Maybe we don't have to come up with that tonight, but it might be helpful to staff to know what their boundaries are.
Councillor Myers, did you have a time frame, and then I'll go to councillor?
Well, I guess I don't have a time frame off the top of my head. I would say, I would kind of put the onus back on the proponent is asking for for it to be on hold and for the extension. I would put the onus on him and say, what's his plan? Because if he says 5 years, I would say wouldn't agree with that. If he's saying a year, then that's worth considering, but I mean, rather than us giving an answer, I think the onus is more on, he's the one asking for the extension. I think the onus is on him to provide a time.
I'm going to go to Councillor Fitton next, and then we're done.
So, let's see, Mr. Patterson is itching at the bit to get some answers here, so hopefully I'll add some questions to those. I had some very similar concerns and questions. One of them was answered with the timeline and where we were at on timelines. Obviously, we were already past the first timeline where he was supposed to have a building permit already in place. Which is a bit of concern. I get it's ongoing. My second question was, the applicant has asked for an extension, but he didn't ask for how long of an extension. Which makes me not really able to answer his question, we're gonna have an extension because there's no parameter to it. The other one was, we were asked to do the zoning amendment on the property, not everything else. I'm okay with deferring that decision, but it was much like Councillor Myers was for the how long. Because, you know, if it's gonna be a significant amount of time, we may have somebody who wants to build something there. You know, we put 3 properties up for sale, they all sold fairly quickly. One of them's been developed, the other one, I understand, is in the process of it. The first one that sold is the one that's dragging its heels, the other 2 are getting houses on. So I think we've got some stuff to go back at. there may be more depending on Mr. Patterson's answers.
Mr. Patterson, do you wish to provide a comment or answer on the timing before, for Reeve, were you gonna make a suggestion on timing? Let the Reeve speak and then.
Thank you, worship. So, I understand the sentiment about let's ask the developer, but we never asked him in the first place. This is something that we wanted to get done. My suggestion would be from the point where they can come to an agreement that we just reset the clock.
Yeah.
And put the exact same timeline back on it again. Of what it was originally. That. Yeah.
I like that, me too. Okay, one more, Councillor Myers and then Mr. Patterson.
Well, sorry, can I just ask for clarity, because I don't understand that. So if Mr. Patterson and Mr. Milton sit down and in January agree that, okay, we need an extension, then the 18 months starts counting from January? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Mr. Patterson?
Certainly, your worship, through council, preliminary discussions in terms of extension have happened. What I would suggest is, that might cover the concerns I've heard is, that the CAO be directed to negotiate, for an extension not greater than 2 years or something to that effect is probably a reasonable target, to address those concerns.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion about extending it?
As a person who was looking at that property and didn't buy it.
Sorry, this is the council meeting.
I know,
It's
but-
not open for the public to speak. I'm sorry.
I know, but you're changing.
I'm sorry, you're not allowed to speak.
It's not me.
Okay, so, my only concern, same thing, is if we don't want that negotiations to drag out for 6 months. You know, so I don't know if we need to put on something needs to be, an agreement needs to be made before the end of January and whatever the timeline is up to 2 years or something like that.
My apologies, Rick Doncaster. My intention was, up to a period of 2 years beyond the initial dates, not from when we come to an agreement.
Okay.
So that would put the clock on that.
Okay, thank you. Clicking buttons here. Are you speaking about timing?
Yeah, a little bit. I would hold hard and fast with that 18 months. If we're setting another 18 months of an extension, it's already another 18 months. We've lapsed 18 months. One of my concerns is we sold the property, we put rules in place to hold it. And we have somebody who decided that, I don't really like the zoning that this developer is obviously well informed and in the business of building things. He bought a property in an R2 zone and said, well, I think I'd like to do something else. Let's propose a zoning amendment, really almost at the end of his 18-month time frame to do it. He hasn't got that. He's felt feedback from the community. He's not really impressed with that idea. Yeah, I think I'd like an extension to think about it while I retain this property, while I go work on one of my other several projects, because he said that in his letter, he's got several other projects on the go. So I'm gonna do that first, and then I'll come back and look at this later. It doesn't really provide anybody else an opportunity to do anything with the property that we put rules on when we sold it. Would we be willing to do this with the other properties that we put up that sold and said, hey, too bad, so sad, we're taking it back and gonna resell it. And that's kind of where my thought is on that.
Staff, have anything you want to say?
Yeah, your worship, through the council, I think that consideration should be given to Mr. Milton's letter in regards to a couple of things that are in the letter. One is his intention, those other projects aren't housing purpose-built rental projects in the town of Beaver. I think that's significant. The other thing is he's expressed a desire to try and work a little bit ahead of time before proposing a zoning bylaw with neighbors. to try and I don't know where that lands, in terms of what he might propose going forward, but it may be a modified version of what he had originally proposed. I don't get the impression it's his intention to sit on his hands on the project. As a matter of fact, he's expressed the desire to do a significant number of these over the coming years. So I think that that's important context to that.
I'm gonna take the privilege of chair and make some comments here because I feel that, I'd like to make comments both on Mr. Middleton's letter and on the county, planning report. And having a bit of background in planning, I think I can add some potential value. I appreciate fully that the applicant, Mr. Milton, for seeing a critical need for rental housing and being willing to invest in our community. We do need he and more people like him in our community. I also appreciate his well-written and sincere letter to explain his motivation and for his willingness to put his proposal on pause to engage with the neighbors of this project. I want to thank the neighbors and residents of the area who took the time to evaluate the proposal and articulate their specific concerns. You are all also engaged and passionate about our community. I want to thank municipal and county planning staff for outlining the correct specific criteria and factors to be considered for this application, and for reminding everyone of the current provincial policy environment of planning in Ontario, and for providing their opinions on how this current rezoning application for medium density housing would be viewed, which is likely favorably by the province, whose policy statements use their official plans and which encourage and allow for a range and mix of housing and residential intensification and higher density infill housing. I do want to remind everyone that the current R2 zoning on the subject property has been in place for at least 50 years and already allows a residential building of 10.5 meters in total height, and to point out that there are several buildings of this same height throughout Deep River, including the new townhouses on Frontenac, two of my direct neighbors' homes on Chadwick, a 3-story home on Beach, and several houses in the East End, including a very large house. The existing landowner does have rights to build a structure to this height and zoning today. I also want to point out that the zoning bylaws of Arden Prior, Renfrew, Petawawa, Pembroke, Mississippi Mills, Laurentian Hills, and Ottawa all have maximum building heights of at least 10.5 meters for R2 zones. I want to point out that contrary to some comments, medium density infill developments are more sustainable than single family homes, as they make more efficient use of land and make more efficient use of expensive municipal infrastructure. I have walked the properties and note that the adjacent properties west and east have generous rear yard setbacks to their homes. And I also note that despite the subject lot's small appearance, it is double the size of each of its two west side neighbors. I find the applicant and his architect have taken reasonable care to consider compatibility in design with neighbors, given the relatively low-rise row house aesthetics of the proposed building, and tried not to exceed the 10.5 meter permitted height of both R2 or R3 zones. However, for the negative, the fact that the number of units and size of this building only works with reduced and very small side yards on both sides is concerning to me. And I find this not to be consistent with the R3 interior side yard zone requirements of any of our neighboring Ottawa Valley municipalities or with the city of Ottawa, most of which require 3 meters. The city of Ottawa in an R3 zone requires a 3 meter landscape side yard wherever the building contains, and I quote, an apartment dwelling, low rise or stacked dwelling type, and the side lot line abuts a residential subzone that does not permit the dwelling type. Petawawa and Laurentian Hills require 4.5 meter side yards. Only Arden Prior is less at 2.4. So throughout the Ottawa Valley, 3 meters is pretty much the standard. I am further influenced by the policies of our own Town of Deep River official plan that already require development and redevelopment, such as this infill, to make efforts to design reasonable compatibility with the density, scale, and height of the existing surrounding residential development. OP 4.2.41, particularly subsection D, which talks about intensification compatibility criteria, which refers to development that fits with the character of a neighborhood. The OP states it does not mean that the development looks the same as neighboring development, rather that the housing form is similar in size, scale, and massing and architectural elements. Subsection II, residential infill must be designed to be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and will be evaluated against the following criteria, including 2, the compatibility of the site design, setbacks, and lot configuration with the existing pattern of development in the area. Then there's other things, including about parking, but it goes to subsection 7, retention and preservation of significant trees, and number 8, maintaining adequate light, view, and privacy for residents on adjacent properties. I really do not see Part C, analysis of planning report, tackling these matters of compatibility, scale, transition, view, and privacy, apart from saying that 1.2 meters is the interior side yard setback in an R2 zone, which is a lower density, so typically lower volume of massing, and so it should be okay. However, this is a proposal to amend R2 zoning to R3 for medium density infill, and in my opinion, the larger side yard setbacks are there for a reason and are necessary to ensure a reasonable transition with neighbors to matters of trees, view, light, and privacy, highlighted by items 7 and 8. In my opinion, R3 infill development should meet the minimum side yard setback on both sides, not be 60% less, because the scale and mass of R3 is larger and these setbacks are there to facilitate compatibility with its R2 neighbors, as required by the OP, which takes great pains to speak to it. I therefore encourage the applicant to consider this in his further deliberations. And a couple of other things I encourage the applicant to consider include deeper risk commitment to becoming a more sustainable community. And as a town founded on and which relies on nuclear energy and electricity, I'd like to see all developers use sustainable heating and cooling, such as heat pumps. I'd also like to ensure that if the next proposal comes back with 7, 8, or 9 units, that underground parking be included as a condition of approval. I would be concerned to approve a 9-unit development on this lot, but have the underground parking canceled due to cost. I do note that parking is a matter that is a large part, and there are several concerns raised. However, it is a matter that is typically addressed on the lot, and parking minimums around the province are much lower than they are here in Two Rivers. So we're already over that. So I want to thank you for listening, and I sincerely apologize for my planning speak, which I don't get to use very much. So anyways, gave me the opportunity. Thank you. So that was my comment just on the future deliberations on this, and I'm going to open it up to anybody else who wishes to comment. I believe Councillor Vaughn may have something to add.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excellent commentary. Thank you for that. I think that certainly aligns with a lot of feedback that I have. That's just ad hoc comments following your comments. My question, however, was if the applicant comes back with a different proposal or a change to the amendment, does that restart the public engagement process? Would that trigger a new meeting and opportunity for people to submit feedback?
Mr. Kaiser's.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Council. The Planning Act does allow Council to decide whether a new public meeting is required or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I would say if we're gonna allow an 18-month extension to this, we require the new proposal to have public feedback.
We have to come to what the proposal is.
Different.
Councillor.
Sure. Only if it's, I didn't Just that in there. Only because even if it's just a slight amendment, right, I think we need the discretion on whether or not to have a public meeting, like if it goes from 9 meetings to 7 or 10 parking spaces to 9. I realize that that's not ideal, but I think that we need to keep that discretion.
We've done, Heskey?
Thank you, your worship. So I guess just on that point, comes to mind that, if there's no zoning amendment required, then there is none.
That's right.
You know, so if the proposed development conforms with our zoning bylaws and official plan, then off you go. So, so I would kind of wait and see on that one, but, I just wanted to take the opportunity to, commend Mr. Milton for, you know, working with, town staff, for working with council, for working with our community. I mean, he's clearly, we've had lots of input on that. I appreciate the planning report. I appreciate, all the input that we've received from the public. And, certainly, appreciate the information that we've received from staff. We're all very well aware of the fact that, we need more housing and a more range of housing, within the town, and we're not unique in that. So, and once again, we have a developer that is in our town, that is working on projects. We need to encourage that. It's not wholesale. I mean, you can't do anything that you want. But I'm really pleased that Mr. Milton's here and he's investing in the community, and I think we need to continue to work with him. So, you know, I encourage him to continue on his other projects and look forward to moving forward, whether it's on this property or any other ones, that benefits our community. And in the long run, if we don't provide the ability of developers to create more and variety of housing options for this community, we are not going to grow. And if we're not growing, we're not going to be sustainable. And I don't know for how long this is going to happen. Whether it's this property or any other property in town, I don't recall a single development in this town in the last 10 years that we haven't had significant opposition to from the neighbors. And like, we need to get over ourselves. Like, we need to be able to expand, not at all costs, I get it, but to provide more housing and encourage more people to move to Deep River and grow our community. So,
Thank you, Councillor Giardini.
I was just going, if you're gonna speak to it, I was just gonna propose a amendment.
The one that we talked about?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Just put a date on it, right? Is that? You go ahead.
So, sorry if I may. So first of all, I appreciate the Reed's comments, and I agree. We should be thankful for people who want to invest in our community, and I am. As far as projects that did not have opposition or strong opposition, actually, there was a very significant project that happened. The 32-unit apartment building was built, and the neighbors on Montcalm were supportive of that. So it isn't always, people don't always object. And that was a much more significant building project. I appreciate the mayor focusing in on this, on a number of issues, but the setbacks, that was my. If we talk about the merits of the proposal, that's my biggest concern with it as well, and I would say that I really find the planning report disappointing on that front, because the language is just, you know, the reduction in the interior side yard from 3 meters to 1.2 meters is not anticipated to have an impact. Well, That doesn't sound like, I don't think that's personally, I don't think, there's no substance to that. I think if you ask the neighbors, it would have a significant impact on the surrounding properties. And the reduction for the 3 meters to 1.2 meters is relatively modest and may be justified if the proposed development still maintains proper, like, I have a lot of trouble with that, that notion of higher density development, but with lower density setbacks. So, again, Mayor Dion expressed it much more eloquently, but I agree with that entirely. And I guess just my final point is just to remind everyone, we're talking about it over 18 months or whatever, the motion that I have moved and has been seconded by Councillor Vaughan is essentially what's on our agenda, except that we delegate the authority to negotiate an amendment to the option to repurchase for council's approval. So we're not putting, the motion on the table at the moment is not to put a number on it, it's just to negotiate that and bring it back for our approval.
A certain date.
I would like to leave the motion the way I proposed it. Because again, obviously staff have heard our discussion tonight. I'm sure, I don't know if the proponent will listen to council and tune into YouTube or whatever, but even not, I'm sure staff will inform him of council's discussion. But again, to my way of thinking, he has requested an extension. I think the onus should be on him to propose a timeline, and then it's up to us to determine whether that's acceptable or not.
I think council feels strongly about, the difference of the motion to bring it back to council without a timeline. Okay, so we have to have a vote on the motion moved by Councillor Myers first, and then if it doesn't pass.
You're looking at a timeline for when to bring it back to council?
Yeah.
So what?
18 months from, can you have two,
Not to bring it back to council, sorry, to have it building permit.
when there's a motion on the floor, can you offer another motion?
Yes.
No, so I was waiting
Yes.
for that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
And,
okay,
I can.
Other amendments.
an amendment, yes,
so I would like to.
Thank you.
Yes, you can, if you wish to put forward an amendment to that amendment, you can. We have to vote on yours first,
Okay, and then.
right, and then.
I had it the other way.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to propose an amendment that we add an 18-month timeline from the date that the current offer expired.
Okay, we're going to then have we need a seconder on that, yes, thank you. Seconder on the, adding the timeline of the 18 months.
I just ask a question. So if Mr. Patterson goes back to Mr. Milton and says, council's okay with extending your deadline on this for 18 months from the date of expiry, comes back and says, I'll have it faster, we're okay with that?
Yeah.
Comes back to council sooner,
Maximum of 8 months.
maximum of 18 months.
Can you make maximum of 18 months?
Your worship, through you to council, quite frankly, I don't think Mr. Milton's gonna have concerns one way or the other on exactly how we do this. If we go with the initial, motion, it just means we'll bring a report back to council in the next couple of months that says, here's the timeline Mr. Milton's requesting. If not, this one would be fine, you could say specifically 18 months is the extension, it doesn't mean you can't do something with it before that. The other thing it doesn't mean is if he thinks all of a sudden 3 months from now that he needs, instead of 18 months, he needs 24 months, he can make that request and we would bring that request to council. So regardless, staff are happy with whatever we're going to do this summer.
Councillor Fitton, are you seconding the amended motion?
It's required.
Anybody else second that? Okay, then I guess we're going to the original amended motion, moved by Councillor Myers. So we'll call the vote on that. All in favor? That's carried. So we're moving now to bylaws. Can I please have Councillor Vaughn for bylaws for town?
Certainly moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Myers, be it resolved that all bylaws section 7 of the agenda be approved and adopted by council in the order they appear on the agenda and sequentially numbered.
Thank you, Councillor. So we are bylaw 52/2024 reserve and reserve fund policy, which we did discuss at last meeting and this meeting. So we'll call the vote on this bylaw. All in favor? That's carried. Now we're moving to bylaw number 53/2024, the Town of Deep River and 2214521 Ontario Inc. Collection, handling, processing, municipal IC&I locations, recyclables and collection and disposal of residential and commercial waste. All in favor of this bylaw? That's carried. And I think we have no matters to close, so the confirmatory bylaw, Councillor Fitton, can you please move?
So moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hughes, be resolved that the following bylaw be read first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be fixed thereto. Bylaw number 54/2024, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the town of Deep River at the meeting held on December 18th, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor. All in favor of confirmatory? That's carried. And Councillor Hughes, can you adjourn us tonight, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fitton, be it resolved that council hereby adjourns the meeting at 8:03 p.m.
Thank you. All in favor of adjournment? That's carried too. Thank you. Have a good night and Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Councillor Fitton, for bringing us the jackets.
Look on the camera, it's like they're all wearing festive Hawaiian shirts.
That was really loud.
Good try.
Please go ahead, long side.
Could I make a comment, please? I wonder that Mr. Murphy's credentials